I used to believe silence meant safety. That if no one was asking questions, nothing was wrong. Now I understand how wrong that belief was. I'm writing this because I can't carry it alone anymore. I don't expect sympathy. I don't even know if I deserve it. But this is the truth of what I did, how it happened, and how everything I thought was solid in my life cracked open in one hospital room. My name is Sarah. I was married to John Miller for 6 years. From the outside, our life looked like something pulled straight from an American postcard. A quiet suburb outside Houston. A 2-story house with trimmed hedges. A Ford F-150 always parked in the driveway. Weekend barbecues. Neighbors who waved and smiled. A husband who worked offshore in the Gulf and brought home a paycheck most people envied. People used to tell me I was lucky, and for a long time I believed them. John was steady in a way that made people feel safe. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't need attention. He worked hard, left before sunrise some weeks, came back exhausted, smelling faintly of salt and diesel. Offshore engineering wasn't just his job. It was his identity. Long stretches away, short bursts at home. That rhythm shaped our marriage from the beginning. At first, I told myself I was strong enough for it. I told myself I understood sacrifice. When we first got married, the distance even felt romantic in a strange way. Long phone calls at night, counting down days until he came home, running into his arms at the airport. I felt chosen, trusted, like I was holding down the fort while he battled storms at sea.
But years don't stay romantic.
They settle into routines, and routines can rot quietly. When John was gone, the house felt too big, too quiet. His boots by the door stayed untouched. His side of the bed stayed cold. Friends would ask how I managed, and I'd smile and say I was used to it. The truth was simpler. I was lonely. I didn't say that out loud because lonely wives don't fit the picture people like to admire. I hosted dinners. I joined yoga classes. I smiled at neighborhood gatherings. I played the role well, and John trusted me completely. That trust was the first thing I broke. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a dramatic moment where I decided to ruin my marriage. It started quietly, almost harmlessly. A conversation that lasted a little too long. A message answered when it didn't need to be. A feeling I told myself was nothing. David Collins was my boss. He was confident in a way that filled rooms. The kind of man who spoke like he expected people to listen. Married. Successful. Respected. At least on the surface. At work, he noticed me. At first, it felt flattering. After years of being alone half my life, someone seeing me, really seeing me, felt intoxicating. He asked about my day. Remembered small details. Complimented my work. Then my appearance. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't mean anything. That's the lie I built everything on. John was offshore when it crossed the line. He always was. I remember the night clearly because I've replayed it 1,000 times since. A work dinner that ran late. Too much wine. Laughter that felt easy. David walked me to my car. He stood too close. I didn't step back. That moment should have ended it. Instead, it opened the door. After that, it became something I scheduled my life around without admitting it. Meetings that lasted longer than necessary. Messages deleted before John came home. Excuses that came too easily. I told myself it was temporary, that I would stop. I didn't. 6 months. That's how long I lived 2 lives. When John came home, I played the devoted wife. I laughed at his stories from the rig. I cooked his favorite meals. I slept beside him and let him believe we were solid. When he left, I became someone else. I hated myself for it, but not enough to stop. When we started talking seriously about having a baby, I thought it would fix me. I thought it would anchor me back into the life I was supposed to want. Friends were having children. My mother talked about grandchildren constantly. John looked hopeful in a way I hadn't seen in years. So when I got pregnant, fear hit me harder than joy. Because I didn't know. I didn't know who the father was. I told myself the timing lined up with John. I counted weeks obsessively. I convinced myself it would be fine. I ended things with David the moment I saw the positive test. Not because I suddenly became loyal, because I was terrified. When I told John the first was pregnant, his face lit up in a way that still haunts me. He hugged me like the world had finally given him something back for all the years he spent away. I let him believe it. We painted the nursery together. Soft yellow walls. He stood on a ladder while I handed him brushes. I flipped through baby name books, pretending I wasn't counting dates in my head. Every kick made my stomach twist. Every time John rested his hand on my belly, guilt burned through me. But I stayed silent. I told myself silence was mercy. The day I went into labor, I was already drowning. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and panic. Hours blurred together. Pain swallowed everything. When they placed my daughter in my arms, something inside me broke open. She was perfect, and I didn't know who she belonged to. Both our mothers were there. John stood nearby, eyes full, overwhelmed. For a moment, the room felt safe. Normal. Like maybe I'd escaped the consequences. Then the paperwork came. The birth certificate. I watched John look at it. Watched the pen sit there, waiting. When he said, "Not yet. We wait for the DNA." My heart stopped. The room froze. I felt exposed.
Cornered.
Terrified in a way I had never felt before. I tried to act offended. I tried to sound shocked. I leaned on my mother's anger like a shield. But inside I knew. This was the moment everything started collapsing. And it was only the beginning. I wish I could say the worst moment of my life was the DNA result. It wasn't. The worst part was everything that happened before it. Because once John said those words in the hospital room, "We wait for the DNA," there was no hiding anymore. No gentle way out. No space left for the version of myself I'd been pretending to be. The silence after his sentence was suffocating. I remember clutching my daughter tighter, like her tiny body could somehow protect me from the truth pressing in from every direction. My mother's anger exploded first. She demanded to know how John could accuse me of something so cruel. She called him paranoid, heartless, exhausted from being offshore too long. I let her speak for me. I nodded. I cried. I played the part of the wounded wife, because it was the only defense I had left. John didn't raise his voice. That scared me more than yelling ever could. He stood there calm, steady, like a man who had already decided something deep inside himself. His mother watched quietly, eyes sharp, not defending him, but not defending me either. Then he said the name. David Collins. It felt like the room tilted. I reacted too fast, too loud. I denied it immediately, aggressively, like I could bury the truth by force. I said David was just my boss. That John was imagining things. That stress was making him cruel. But my body betrayed me. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My eyes wouldn't meet his. And when he said the timing didn't add up, that his offshore schedule lined up too perfectly with my late nights, I felt the lie slipping. I leaned harder on outrage. I accused him of ruining the happiest day of our lives, of humiliating me in front of our mothers, of turning joy into suspicion. Inside, I was screaming, because I knew he wasn't guessing. John didn't accuse blindly. He never had. He had waited,
Watched.
listened, counted. When he mentioned that another woman from work had talked, that David bragged, I felt something inside my chest crack. I tried to laugh it off. I tried to act shocked. But then it happened. The mistake. He promised, I said. The words slipped out before my brain could stop them. The room went dead silent. I tried to fix it instantly. I said I misspoke. I said John twisted my words. I said stress made me say things I didn't mean. But it was too late. You can't unring a bell like that. John didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just looked at me like something fragile inside him had finally shattered. My mother's face changed too. Not anger anymore, but confusion.
Fear.
John pressed gently after that, and every question felt like a blade. Why did my stories change? Why did my late nights line up with his time offshore? Why did David's name keep appearing in places it didn't belong? I cried. I begged. I asked him not to do this there. Not in front of our child. Not in that room. But John didn't move. He told everyone we would wait 72 hours. For science. For truth. No signatures. No assumptions. Then he walked out. I watched him leave through tears, knowing something irreversible had just happened. The next 3 days were unbearable. John didn't come home. He didn't answer my calls. I stayed at my mother's house with the baby, surrounded by people, but completely alone. My mother tried to reassure me at first, telling me John would calm down, that he was being dramatic, that men don't think clearly under stress. But even she stopped sounding confident after the second day, because doubt had crept in. I replayed everything over and over. Every message I deleted. Every excuse I made. Every time I chose attention over honesty. David tried to call me. I didn't answer. I was furious with him for not protecting me, for being careless, for bragging. But deeper than that, I was furious with myself for ever believing he would. When the DNA results came, John didn't call first. He showed up. He stood in my mother's living room holding an envelope like it weighed nothing and everything at the same time. His mother was with him. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. I already knew the answer before he opened it. The paper shook in his hand just slightly as he read it. 0%. No chance. My daughter wasn't his. I broke. I collapsed into sobs, so violent my mother had to hold the baby. I apologized over and over, but the words sounded meaningless even to me. John didn't yell. He didn't insult me. He just said the marriage was over. That sentence hurt more than anything else. He left again, and this time I knew he wasn't coming back. The days after that felt unreal. Lawyers. Paperwork. Quiet conversations I wasn't part of. John filed for divorce immediately. No hesitation. No bargaining. The house. The accounts. Everything unraveled faster than I could process. And then something else happened. Whispers. Other wives. Other husbands. David Collins' name started spreading through circles I didn't control. Stories surfaced, too many to ignore. Affairs. Bragging. Patterns. I wasn't special. I was just one of many. When I heard David had been hospitalized, I felt nothing. No relief. No guilt. Just emptiness. By the time the divorce was finalized, my life looked nothing like it had before. No marriage. No house. No reputation. Just a child in my arms and the weight of knowing every choice that led me here was my own. And still, the story wasn't finished. Because watching John walk away wasn't the end of my punishment. It was only the moment I realized what I had truly lost. When everything finally went quiet, that's when the reality hit. Not in one dramatic moment. Not with shouting or tears. But slowly, in the empty spaces where my old life used to be. After the divorce papers were signed, John disappeared from my world completely. No messages. No arguments. No last conversations meant to bring closure. Just silence. And I learned something painful in that silence. Some people don't leave loudly. They leave once.
Cleanly.
The house we once shared was sold. Not with fights or negotiations I could influence. John handled everything through lawyers. I packed what little was mine and moved back into my mother's home with my daughter. The same woman who had defended me so fiercely in the hospital now avoided long conversations. She helped with the baby, yes, but there was a distance between us that hadn't existed before. I could feel it in the pauses, in the way she sighed when she thought I wasn't looking. Disappointment has weight. It sits in rooms. I felt it every day. Friends stopped calling. Some quietly drifted away. Others looked at me differently when we crossed paths. No one asked for my side of the story anymore. Houston isn't a small town, but stories like mine travel fast. A cheating wife. A baby that wasn't her husband's. A man who walked away with his dignity intact. That was the version people told. And they weren't wrong. At night, after my daughter finally slept, I would sit alone and replay everything. Not just the affair, but the moments before it. The choices that led me there. The times I could have stopped. Loneliness didn't make me cheat. Cowardice did. I was afraid to speak. Afraid to confront my unhappiness. Afraid to risk losing the comfort of a stable life. So instead, I destroyed it quietly. John never contacted me again.
But I heard about him.
People talk. They said he moved on faster than anyone expected. Not recklessly. Not desperately. Calmly. He focused on work. Took longer offshore rotations. Bought a smaller place closer to the water. And eventually there was another woman. Her name was Lily. I didn't stalk her online at first. I told myself I didn't care. That John's life was no longer my business. That was a lie. When I finally looked, she was nothing like me. Quiet. Grounded. The kind of woman who didn't need attention to feel whole. Someone who listened instead of filling silence with noise. Seeing them together hurt in a way I didn't expect. Not because I wanted John back, but because I realized something I had lost forever.
His respect.
You can survive without love, but losing respect from someone who once trusted you with their entire life leaves a scar nothing fills. David Collins vanished from my world completely. His name became something people whispered instead of said openly. Work distanced itself from him. Opportunities dried up. Whatever happened to him afterward wasn't something I celebrated. It wasn't revenge. It was consequence. And consequences don't ask if you're ready. Raising my daughter alone forced me to grow in ways I had avoided my entire adult life. There was no one to hide behind. No one to impress. No image to protect. Just responsibility. Just truth. I told myself I would never lie to her. That when she was old enough, I would tell her the truth about who I was, about the mistakes I made. Not to burden her, but to make sure she never repeated them. Some nights, when she sleeps on my chest, I think about the life she almost had. The father who would have loved her if she had been his. That thought hurts more than any insult ever could. Because my choices didn't just break a marriage. They stole a future that could have been. I don't write this to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I write this because stories like mine are often told by everyone except the person who caused the damage. And while that damage can never be undone, honesty is the only thing I have left. John moved forward. I stayed behind with the consequences. And that is the difference between regret and punishment. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes. And if you don't protect it with honesty, someone else will use your silence as an invitation. I broke my marriage. I broke a man who trusted me. And I live with that every day. This is my story. And this is where it ends.